Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange. I'm here with yet another science fiction and fantasy wrap-up. I read some full-length novels as well as a handful of novellas. I was just feeling the format, so I went with it. As usual, I got some good recommendations, so let's get started. First, let's talk science fiction, and the full-length novel that I read was Here, Now, and Then by Chen. And this is a contemporary science fiction novel that follows a man that works as a time traveler. And so his job is to go back in time and basically make sure that events happen in the way they should. However, something goes terribly wrong and he gets stuck back in the 90s. He partially loses his memory, so he doesn't fully remember his position, what he was trying to do. And he ends up falling in love, getting married, and starting a family. Then so years later, he has a teenage daughter and a full life when a team of time traveling agents come to rescue him and bring him home. He finds out that he also had a full life and a fiance in the future that he's from, and he is asked to leave his other life behind. And so this is partially a time travel story because you do have these two timelines. But at the core, this is very much a story about family and love and connection. And the main character is really struggling between the two lives that he lives and having attachments to the wife and daughter of his past and also the fiance of his future, or what should be his current day. And I really enjoyed this one. There's a lot of emphasis on food and it very much has that family feel. It reminded me a lot of Dark Matter. So if you enjoyed that book, I would personally recommend you try this one. Dark Matter had more of a focus on the scientific theory, while this one has more of a focus on the emotional family character aspects. But there definitely is overlap between the two books, and I just thought it was very enjoyable, very engaging, and I definitely want to check out more by this author because I thought this was a really strong debut. And for anyone who enjoys time travel stories, which I think I do, but I don't read them enough, this is one I would certainly recommend. Now, switching to some short fiction, I read a novella called Prime Meridian by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, and I picked this up thinking it was a space opera, and it is not. It is set in the future, but it's set in a future of Mexico where you find out that humans have gone on to colonize Mars. And the main character is a 20-something woman who is struggling in her life. She has completed some education, but is basically underemployed. So she's working a lot of part-time freelance jobs, including working as a friend for hire, which is an actual possible job. And I really enjoyed those aspects of the story. And the reason that this has a scientific element to it is, again, the fact that these colonies exist and our main character is dreaming about the day that she hopes she will be able to go and head off to Mars and escape her life. So while it is framed in a future, there's very little focus on technology. I did not notice any technology in the future of this Mexico that wouldn't exist today. And I just found it read much more like a contemporary than the science fiction book I thought it would be. There was really no element of space travel, but I still enjoyed it. It's very much a story of, again, like kind of a lost 20-something, which is very much relatable to people in their 20s. I guess I'm in my 30s now, but I still remember those days. So not the best book I ever read, but still a decent one, and it was a quick read for sure. Then I read a novella called Kingdom of Needle and Bone by Mira, who of course is the pen name for Sean McGuire. I personally prefer when she writes under this pen name because these books tend to be more science fiction horror. And this novella follows a future where there is a virus outbreak, and you get to follow the different people in this novel as they deal with that infection. Now, this book is highly framed around the importance of vaccinations, and I don't usually get into politics on my channel, but because I feel so strongly about it, I'm going to mention that I am pro-vaccine, which is the same viewpoint as the author. So for the most part, I did agree with the author's standpoints. However, as a story, as a piece of fiction, I really did not like this novella, and that was because it felt like a very thinly veiled essay where the author was putting herself on a soapbox and sharing her views. And I think that if you're someone who is anti-vaccine, reading this novella is not going to convince you otherwise. It's just going to come across as very preachy. And again, even though I shared a lot of her beliefs, I didn't fully agree with the way she was making her arguments and framing a lot of it around pro-life choices. And I just felt like there was just no story to it. So I appreciate what she was trying to do, but I just wish she had written an essay, put it online, and done that instead of trying to sell this as a piece of fiction, which was very disappointing. Now let's switch over to fantasy, and I read Fate of the Fallen by Kade, which is a story of a pair of best friends. One is believed to be the chosen one. You find out early on that it has been prophesied that he will save the world, and the story is primarily told from the perspective of his best friend, who is a forester and just a very loyal companion. A lot of times this man gets compared to Sam from The Lord of the Rings, and that's because this book in a lot of ways is very much a satire or something to be poking fun at those classic fantasy stories like Lord of the Rings and The Wheel of Time. And for the most part, I did enjoy this one. I especially like the beginning. I do think that you should at least have an understanding of those classic narratives in order to fully appreciate this one. So I am glad that I've read things like The Wheel of Time first. And I'll say that this book was quite funny. There's a lot of banter in it. I did it as an audio, which I think worked really well. The narrator is a very popular one. And because so much of the humor has to do with the banter and chatter between the characters, you really get that coming to life through an audiobook narration. And I liked it, but it kind of got a little too goofy for me. I can be hit or miss when it comes to humor in my fantasy and science fiction and all of that. So I liked it at the beginning. At first, I was totally going along. I honestly thought this could be like a 5-star read, but some of the choices, some of the things that happened just seemed too ridiculous. And for me, the humor got to the point that it kind of cut the tension. So it very much plays on the trope of the chosen one and asks the question of what would you do if the chosen one didn't actually fulfill his destiny? Overall, I enjoyed this one, but by the end, I did feel like I was getting a bit too much of the humor and wanted the plot to be a little more serious than it was because it got pretty ridiculous. And finally, I want to talk about a fantasy novella, and that is The Haunting of Tramcar 15 by Djèlí Clark. And this is the story of two bureaucrats that are sent out to investigate a tram car that is possibly haunted and possessed. And this is definitely fantasy, not horror. I should clarify, it's not scary at all. But what they do is they go and investigate what is happening. This is set in a historical setting of Egypt where there is a change in history where they discovered that the gods are real and Egypt moved into a place of power. And I really enjoyed this book for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of good humor in it. Egypt, of course, plays a large role in the background of the story, and I love that diverse element to it. And I like the fact that you get to see the bureaucratic restraints of this organization because they are sent by the government and specifically work in a office where they are sent to investigate these things, but they don't actually have the resources to take care of what is happening in the tram car, and it's just really funny. So again, not scary at all. This is not one of my horror wrap-ups. There's a reason I'm putting it in my fantasy recommendations, but I really enjoyed it. I got a chance to listen to the audiobook via Scribd, which is fantastic. I've gotten to listen to so many audiobooks I never would have been able to without Scribd, so link down below. And if you haven't checked it out and you enjoyed just a fun, quick, diverse piece of fantasy that is very different, something non-European centered, I definitely recommend this one. So that is it for this video. You know the drill. Let me know your thoughts on any of the books I mentioned. Are you planning on picking them up from my reviews? And recommend me your favorite science fiction or fantasy novellas. Apparently, I am just really feeling the short format right now, and I would love to read even more. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.